16th, 2021. We'll get started. And the first thing we have is an agenda check. Is there anything anybody wants to add, change to the agenda? Great. Then we will jump right into our customer experience improvement. And I think that Julie and Rachel are going to take the lead on that.
We are, thank you. So hi everyone, I'm Julie McGahee, Chief Customer Officer and one of the sponsors for the Customer Experience Improvement Project, also known as CEI. Joining me is Rachel Chilton, our Customer Experience Program Manager. So a little bit of background before we start our demo. The CEI project was created with the goal of giving our customers just really an easy to use, modern online self-service experience with Eweb. And although the project itself is centered around some upgraded technology to give us a new online customer portal, more flexible payment processing, and a new bill design, it's also an opportunity, I think, for us to take a fresh look at just the overall customer experience. So how we interact with our customers at all touch points and kind of ask ourselves, could we be doing that better? So we anticipate product delivery from our vendors in March, at which time we will have some employees who are also customers of ours use the system and give us some feedback. And then a product launch will follow after that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel for a look at our new customer portal.
Great. Thanks, Julie, and good evening, commissioners. I'm super excited to show you this portal demo. And also, we'll just get it out there that this is weird. This is a super weird experience to interact with the board from my home over a screen. But here we go. Going to jump right in. And share my screen, and I'm actually going to turn my video off because I'm going to share from my other screen so you're not just staring at the side of my head the whole time. So I'll turn my video off and see about sharing my screen. Let me know when you can see it.
Yep, we've got it, Rachel.
That's great.
Yep.
So this is the login screen for Eweb's new online customer portal, and I'm just going to go ahead and log right in. I already did all of the registration, but I will show you the registration screen as well. It's pretty darn simple to register. Just one thing to note is customers need to register for an account on the portal, and then following that, they will connect their Eweb account or accounts to their profile. But I will go back to the login page and sign in. And I will just say that because this is a live demo and it's still in a test environment, there's always the opportunity for demo gremlins. So hopefully we don't run into any, but we're still working on the product and we could certainly run into something. So here is the account summary screen. This is what any customer will see when they first log in. And the first thing I want to bring your attention to is that it's responsive design. So if I shrink that down, you can see that it grows and shrinks with it. And we have the menu in what we call a hamburger menu at that point. But I'll do the rest of the demo in desktop so you can actually see everything. That hamburger menu is in desktop view, just a menu you're used to that's across any website across the top so customers can navigate throughout. And the first thing that you really see is this account balance, which Minnie has recently paid her bill, so she has account balance of 0 right now. But this is a new thing for Eweb and for customers in that this is real time. So if a new charges hit and Minnie has a bill and she goes in and only pays half of it, she'll be able to see that right away. So real-time payments is a new improvement we're very excited about. Obviously make payment, so a big blue button there. One of the first things that customers will see besides their account balance and when that payment is due. And if they click on make payment, we'll hop over to the payments page, which is just sort of a standard payments page. They can add multiple payment accounts to their wallet, select to pay. She doesn't have a bill to pay right now, but we can schedule a payment later. Just some basic payment functionality there. I'll go back to the account summary. Can download a PDF of the current bill. I'm not going to do that because this is actually, so even though we changed the, the specific information. This is a customer account we're looking at, and that will download a real bill, so we're not going to do that in a live demo. But we did send some bills ahead of time. So if you have any questions about the bill redesign, would be happy to entertain those at the end as well. You can also view billing history and payment history. So click on those and you can see those down here as well. But I'm not going to get down here because down here is where I get really excited. So I have to stay focused with the first thing first before I get myself excited about usage graphs. But you can see, billing history, and you can export to Excel for customers that really like to dive in. And you can, the same thing with payment history, you can export that to Excel. Over here on customer enrollments. So the two enrollments that we are going to have at the time of launch is auto pay and paperless bill. So this is another change. Customers can have a portal account and choose to be paperless or not. So currently those go together in Eweb's payment platform, where you're paperless and you have a profile, they go together. So now those can be separated if customers prefer. And we look forward to adding some additional customer enrollments as we go forward. And we're really looking at launching this product as sort of what we're calling minimum viable product. So making sure we're doing all the basics really well, and then looking at how do customers use it, where can we add more functionality and features to help us reach operational and strategic goals, help our customers reach the kind of customer experience that they would like to have, and then we'll add more programs that we can enroll here. So things like bill assistance, payment arrangements, in the future when we have additional pricing programs or payment programs, be able to all do that from the online portal. So some quick links. So I just want to highlight this start, stop, transfer service. Those are going to go to our existing online application at the time of launch, but that'll be one of the first things that we look to add after launch. One of the first enhancements is to roll start, stop, transfer service into the portal experience as well. So there's a lot of good reasons to roll that into an authenticated experience. We can pre-populate some stuff for customers and just make it smoother for them. I am going to hop over really quick to notifications, because that is something that we have something new there. So a lot of the notifications themselves are not new. We provide customers with these today if they want them. But what we don't do today is provide text message notifications. So that's new functionality. Again, we're excited to enter into the text message space. Go back to account summary. So up here in this utility menu is where we have some additional features that we're excited about. So customers, if they have multiple accounts, so if they have a rental or are kind of watching after their college-age kids account, something like that, they can switch between accounts. So if I go here to switch, I added another account for Minnie to look at. And so if I come over here and look at Daisy's account, you can see that I picked this one just to show that we're also trying to roll in messaging if customers are past due. So that's in line with some of the goals that we had around the bill design as well, to make sure that our customers understand if they're past due and the consequences of that. But I'm going to go back to Minnie's account for this. So if you have multiple accounts, you can add as many as you want here and switch between them, have a default account. If like a landlord situation, when you go to pay, you can pay multiple accounts at a time, just trying to make it as simple as possible for customers to manage their eWeb accounts, especially when they have multiple. I'm going to go back to Minnie. You can also share an account. This is slightly different than adding an account. So this is something we're excited about, given that we are a college community and we have a lot of roommate situations. So if Minnie were to share her account with someone, that means that that person would have access to view all of this same stuff, but they would maintain their own wallet. So if Minnie has a roommate that needs to pay half the bill, that roommate would be able to see all of the details and then pay their half of the bill from their wallet and not be able to see any of Minnie's payment details. So keeping our customers' payment information secure is obviously a very high priority. And then activity, which I could click on that, is just showing everything that this has happened on this account and shows the user. So you can see I actually did share my account with a friend, Tommy, earlier. And so if Tommy were to come in and do something on this account, it would show user Tommy and what Tommy had done as well, so they can keep track of what's going on with the account. If I pop back over to the account summary, all right, and I'm going to scroll down some. And so this is where, again, I start getting really excited about the future of what we can do with this portal. So here is a charges graph to give our customers a visual of the breakdown of their monthly bill. And so I'm just going to walk through a little bit of a story for Minnie here. So we'll say that Minnie, recently got her January bill. She went in and paid it, but she definitely felt like it was a little higher than it normally is. And so she looks at the graph and sees, sure enough, I mean, it's quite a bit higher than her typical bill. And so starts thinking how she can dig in with the portal, to start figuring out why that might be. And one of the first things she notices is how much bigger the wastewater, City of Eugene wastewater portion has become for that month. And she knows that's related to her water usage. She's in winter, it's based on her water usage. So she can click on the legend here and actually get rid of the other charges and just really drill down and see, wow, it was a pretty big increase in her water payment and her City of Eugene wastewater payment. So now she's thinking, I'm going to really dig into my usage, my water usage, to see how I might be able to control that. So she goes over to the usage portion, usage graph, and looks at her dashboard. And so besides just having, so now we're looking at the electric, and we're going to look at water here in a minute. So you can see the usage, and this line here is temperature. And eventually, when we are able to connect in with smart metering data, this is where we can provide interval data to customers and really start letting customers drill into usage. But even without smart metering data, it still could be very useful. So I'm actually going to look at the comparison graphs for Minnie and look at water. And this is where I think a story can be told. So, looking at November of this last year compared to 2019 and December, some pretty big jumps. And so something obviously changed in that household and behavior. And so, another big jump in January. And so maybe, somewhere in the middle of November, Minnie had a bunch of family members come live with her. Her out of town son and his family are in town and have moved here looking for a house. So, she looks at this and can really start thinking about what are the behavior changes that happened between, January of 2019 and 2020 to this year that has made this big jump that has now really impacted her bill. And so that's kind of this exciting part of really starting to have those building blocks for customers to get them from thinking about how their behavior drives their usage, which drives their cost. And realistically, how many customers are going to be diving in like Minnie just did, right out the gate? I don't know. I mean, honestly, may not be that many. I think that's it's our job to help teach customers to use the tool in a way that shifts the relationship and really gets them to start thinking less about bills and payments and more about behavior and choices as they relate to how and when they use water and electricity. Which will really help us, march our way towards meeting more operational and strategic goals using this tool, and especially as we, add more enhancements to it. So that is really the end of the basic demo. So I'll just kind of, end with my few closing statements before entertaining any of your questions, which I'd be happy to answer, or Julie would be happy to answer. Is we are planning an extensive campaign at rollout that's focused on introducing the new bill to customers, because that's going to affect all customers, that new bill design, and then helping our current e-bill and auto pay customers through the transition. We have a really high e-bill paperless bill adoption. Well over a third of our customers are currently on paperless bill, and we have about 17,000 customers that are on auto pay. So it's a pretty big chunk of our customer base that we need to help through the transition process. And then once we get through that and are, after the stabilization period, we'll really turn our attention to focusing on helping customers use the new tool and learning how they're using it, where there are gaps, so that we can increase functionality and add additional features, because this definitely isn't a one and done. It's an iterative design process that we will keep adding to for years to come. So that is the end of what I have for you today. but I'll keep sharing my screen for now so that if you have any details, I can dive in.
Well, Rachel, I love how excited you are about that. And I'm getting an echo. Are you hearing the echo?
Oh, that might be me. I'll mute. I live in the middle of nowhere, and so sometimes there's a delay.
Okay, now I'm not echoing anymore. So yes, Rachel, I love how excited you are about that. And we can open up a queue for questions if there's anyone who has questions. Matt, go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation, Rachel, and all the work that I suspect went on in the background to get us to where we are. I share your excitement about this. I am a data nerd too. This is really great. A couple questions is, I assume it's the same whether it's a commercial customer or residential customer, but if there's any differentiation, I'd be interested in knowing about that. I'm also curious how far back the data goes. In what kind of access the customer has to their historic data.
So for the first question, the experience is basically the same for commercial customers and residential customers right now. I think there will be opportunity for enhancements going forward because that's definitely different needs there for those customers. And then for historical data, the stuff that was actually here. I like how I'm explaining it theoretically when I can still show it. So everything that you see here in payment history and billing history goes back 3 years. So the current bill views, we're aiming for having 1 year of historic bills at launch. We may have more than that, and we will keep adding those historic views because we're transitioning between vendors. And so we'll continue to add the historic views of the PDFs of bills until we also get to 3 years. So, and I think we're on track. Someone could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're on track to have more than a year at the time we launch.
Great. John Borofsky, I think you had your hand raised.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. A couple of questions. The bill that got sent out with our packet, and one of the questions I had was on the water side. I know that in my household, when we have summer and irrigation, there's different rates of water when you hit a certain level of usage, and I didn't really see that broken down, at least on the bill that was there. I'm just wondering, because that's one of the things that my wife notices is like, okay, we're watering the garden, we're watering the lawn, and our summertime water rate obviously goes up because we hit a kilogallon threshold. And I just want to make sure that that's as clear as we can make it to our customers, because that's something that we see and it jumps out at us. You know, normally we open the bill, we look at it, we pay it. But come irrigation time, it's like, holy crap, our bill went from here to here. And I think we really need to be clear on that. And I didn't notice it on the sample bill. So can you address that? And then I've got one other question.
Sure. Yeah, so the sample bill we provided obviously doesn't have the tiered water rates, so this customer didn't go into an additional tier. But we did do quite a bit of work in simplifying the bill print labels. And unfortunately, we've done more work since this sample was provided. So even this one, the water residential inside city, we've done some work to clear it up. No need for hyphens in that kind of a situation, and have definitely done some work to make it clear when a customer goes into an additional water tier based on their usage. And I'd be happy to find some additional examples and share those with you.
Thanks. No, like I said, I just want to make sure that that's something that is usable to the customer, so that they can understand that when their bill in May was, $27, and in June it went to $127, that they're clear as to why that is, and they might be able to remedy that. The second thing I was wondering is, has there been any thought to incentivizing paperless and auto pay? Because I know obviously that's got to be more efficient for the organization, and if you can incentivize it in the front end and then it's all set up. I mean, I see that on a lot of my bills. It's like, yeah, do you want to do paperless? Do you want to do auto pay? You know, it might be convenient, but if there's a little bit of a spiff to it in the beginning, that might help, and the organization might see efficiencies through that.
We have considered that, and I think we'll continue to in the future. I will say that even without incentivizing, it might just be, you know, the wonderful community that we serve. Even without incentivizing, we have, actually I wrote it down so I could give you so currently we have 38% of our customers on paperless billing, and our bill print vendor that we're getting ready to, to start using, they, are pretty shocked by that. Usually industry average is between, 20-25%, and their customers, like 30% is pretty high. So 38% is remarkable. But we can certainly, consider incentivizing for, the customers that haven't made the jump. And I also think that part of the reason that customers haven't made the jump is because we made them make the decision of, if they were paperless, like having to have an account and log in, and they don't have to do that anymore. So you have to make an account, log in, make yourself paperless, but then you can keep managing your account from other different, directions and channels. And so we've made a lot more options that I think will increase adoption after we kind of focus on that first bit of just transitioning the existing 38% of customers. And I actually want to circle back 1 second because back to the tiered rates thing. So I wanted to point out something that on the bill that is another spot I get really excited. So I get very excited about data-driven anything. So we can now provide these messages. These aren't great examples, but we're able to provide messages on a customer's bill that is specific to the customer situation based on data that we have for them. And so in theory, we don't have this one set up, but in theory, we could actually even have a message that is specific to your water has gone into a second tier, and here's an explanation about it. And here's where you can get some tips about, water conservation and controlling your water usage. And we'll be able to do that kind of thing based on, the data provided in the file that we give to the bill print vendor. So that's something brand new, and it's something that honestly other utilities aren't even doing a lot of. We're a little bit cutting edge there, and I'm very excited about it. And that is, thank you for that, because I'm gonna put it on the list because I hadn't considered that one.
Great. Sonia, do you have any questions? And then John.
Yeah, I had just a few. Well, one, before I jump into the questions, thank you so much. I'm really excited. This looks wonderful. It's definitely a major upgrade from what we have now. So I didn't catch when the launch was expected to be on it. So I guess that was my first question. I just missed it in the paperwork.
Yeah, so we are kind of looking at it in 3 steps. So product delivery, looking at mid to late March, and then using that that final product to do some last user experience testing with some friendly Ewebbers who are also customers, and Frank has agreed to be a part of that group as well. And then we will look at rolling out after that. So approximately a month after that. So we're still aiming for end of April, but ready to be flexible. Obviously, bills and payments is something that you cannot mess up, and so we want to be 100% confident that we are ready for customers to have the new bill and make payments through these new channels. Because we actually didn't even mention this also is upgrading and replacing our IVR, so when customers pay by phone. So it's really affecting a lot of our payments. 57% of our payments come through these channels, and 100% of our bills go out through that channel. So we're going to be very careful. But that's our.
I'd be happy to be a guinea pig if you need other guinea pigs.
Sure, I will. I'll take all the feedback I can get before we actually put it out to sometimes less friendly customers.
Do commissioners count as friendly Ewebbers or unfriendly Ewebbers? I don't know. I'm trying to figure that one out.
Depends on the staff person asking the question, Frank.
And on the different bill options, it seemed like from the packet that you sent us, there was a number of different layouts. Are you going through the process and kind of determining which layout to do, or do customers have the ability to pick which layout? I just wasn't sure, so I thought I'd ask a little bit more. Or is this the whole bill? Because it seemed like it was the same information presented in like 3 or 4 different ways.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a couple of different bill presentments based on programs that customers are in. So this first one that you're seeing is just our standard bill. This is what most residential customers will look like, most commercial customers. There's a little bit of nuances to the commercial bill, but it's pretty much the same. And then the second one is for customers that participate in our budget bill program, so where every month they pay the same amount. And our current budget bill presentment isn't great. I mean, it just isn't. It doesn't help the customer very much. They're paying that flat amount, and they don't necessarily know unless they track themselves if they're on track or if they're going to, come to their kind of renewal month and either have built up a big credit or owe us more money because they actually were overusing and above their budget. And so that's actually one of the things, again, I've said the word excited a lot. I need to get my thesaurus out, but I get very excited about what we were able to do with the budget bill, helping customers stay on track. So if they're tracking over based on their rolling 12-month average, or if they're on track or under, so that they can really use budget bill for what it's supposed to be used for, which is to help manage their costs and think about their behavior and how that affects the monthly cost. And then we also, I didn't provide an example because it's a much smaller customer base, but we also have a different presentment for net meter customers because again, they're interested in different data. We present different data on the bill for them.
Right.
And the little circle here doesn't work as well when that's a negative number. So had to come up with that for net meter customers if they are, generating more than using. And then there's also a different, sorry if that's scrolling, I realize I can make everybody dizzy, I'll go slower, but there's a special presentment for our master bill customers, so our really large key accounts. So that has a much improved presentment. And then the disconnection notice, which isn't a bill, it's a letter, a notice to them, but tried to make it very clear. This is very different from our current one. Make it very clear and transparent to our customers exactly what will happen if they don't pay, and including additional charges that they may accrue. So trying to be kind with honesty for our customers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate the different distinctions because I wasn't sure if they were different options, but now I completely understand. One thing that I didn't see on here now, customers who do like the green power donation monthly, does that come up on the bill? How does that present?
Sure, that will just be another, so if I scroll back up here, that would be a line item under the details of electric. So they would, see that as a label here that they're basically paying that premium, or if they buy a block, so it depends on kind of how they participate with the green power program. It would just show up in the details of the line. And then that's again another thing that we can address in the message center. We can thank them, we can promote it, we can say, hey, you're participating in green power, and now we're rolling out this new, carbon product. We think you might be interested in this as well. So really, using the bill a lot more, tactfully.
Excellent. I have more questions, but I can pause and let others ask theirs. And then if we have time, I can come back if that works.
Sure. John Brown, you are next.
Thank you. Great presentation. I can tell you're pretty vested in this. This is great. Quick question on the stormwater. I noticed the terminology's changed because currently it's $4 and some odd cents per ISU, and the bill is based upon your impervious surface unit. a certain dollar amount, and that's where it's currently reported. And now, did they reclassify these? Where did we come up with general or small residential and general residential and things like that? Or did they, is that just some iteration?
So these are just the examples provided. That information is still on bills where it applies. And we have been doing some incremental improvement with the City of Eugene to actually try and clear up the stormwater portion of the bill and around ESUs, and there's definitely some confusion there. So again, I can round up some examples that show that. It's still on bills where it needs to be. It's just that the examples that I happen to provide, because it doesn't apply, it's not there.
Okay, thank you. And then the other one, I've had some fun. I'm on e-bill and AutoPay, and when the credit cards expire, it seems to me that, and I think staff has admitted that there's a rather cumbersome process. We can reintroduce new credit card information, but then we have to do something else. Otherwise, it won't auto-pay, and then you get thrown into delinquents. Is that something that you've rectified, that issue or that challenge?
I can't tell you how excited I am you brought that up, because
it was fun for me too. I love the story.
And you're not the only one that it's happened to. So that's part of how we built this new thing, is we used real customer use cases, and you were one, Commissioner Brown. So we used that case to say, how would this happen today in this new system? And obviously, in theory, it still could, because if there is a way, customers at some point will figure it out. But it's much, much clearer to a customer that if they are on AutoPay and they alter the payment method that is associated with AutoPay, that it could affect AutoPay. So to some degree. So if you just update your information, you're fine. If you delete that account, it will boot you off of AutoPay, because now you don't have a payment associated with your AutoPay. But the messaging is much clearer, and we used you as a case.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and sorry I was a little pain there, but we won for it. But the bottom line is, if the messaging's there, is how you can accomplish what you need to be done. I think that was the advice I could give. It's not the technical issue. It's just, this is what you need to do, or be cautious of it, because I'm not so sure you get warned right now. But thank you very much.
So I just have a quick question about the customer service reps. So does this help them in any way with their job, other than maybe like pointing customers that they can go online? But I'm just curious if somehow this information is presented in a way that helps them as well, or maybe that's not needed, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, so our customer service analysts are also just as excited as I am. I'll speak for them. So this is a lot of improvement for them. And they were, a lot of them very involved, especially in the bill redesign process, because they get a lot of questions about the bill. So just in a simple way, I'll say yes, it definitely improves their experience. I'm really invested in the fact that employee experience and customer experience go together. Very hard to separate those. So we've been doing a lot of work on the internal side, and I think that's kind of what Julie was mentioning, that it's more than just a technology project, and we've really done a lot of work internally on processes and making sure that customer service in particular and billing operations are prepared to support the changes and on board with the changes.
Great, thank you. I think it looks fantastic, so great job. Sonia, you had other questions, and I don't know if other people have other questions as well, but I'm going to pass it to you, Sonia, and then we can start another queue.
Great, thank you. Kind of building off of what John Brown brought up on the payment issue, I've definitely had that situation where I had to cancel a card because of other fraudulent activity, and then when I went to go re-up it, it didn't catch. Is there a way, currently we can't pick when it pays? It just pays on the due date. Is that different now? Because it would be helpful to be able to pay before the date, so you can confirm that yes, indeed, it actually did pay, so that it doesn't hit the due date and then cause an issue of, now you haven't paid. And does the new system allow you to pick a date to pay so you can actually pay before the due date?
If you're on autopay, no. So autopay will continue to pull out on the date it is due. There are some additional reminders that can be helpful. So, oh, I logged me out because of inactivity, but so I'll just explain it and I'll log back in here in a minute. But so you can get reminders if you're past due, and that includes text reminders. So if that's something that is of concern. If you're not on autopay, you can select to pay later. So you can schedule payments for any time you want, so long as you are current. So those are sort of two different options. So
if you schedule a payment, let's say you had to change your card, because I ran into that same problem. I had to change my card, and then it takes a little bit before it like re-ups to the new card. And so if you go on to autopay, you can't pay it in time. I guess it sounds like you have to schedule the payment, but then you don't want it to double pay on when the date comes up. It might just be something, if there was any way to look into that, it would definitely improve customer experience. Just from my perspective, it's nice to be able to, pay, to pick a date to pay and say, okay, yes, I'm on auto pay, but if my due date is the 20th, I would like to actually auto pay on the 15th so that I can confirm that, yes, it is all paid, and then I'm not going to ever go into that like late payment time. But anyway, the other question I had was on mobile services. Can we, since it shrinks down and does all that, does it work really well on different mobile devices?
it does, yes. So this is kind of the like rudimentary way to show it is by just growing and shrinking my screen.
Okay.
But you could actually, yeah, I mean, it looks great. We've done testing across multiple devices, phones, tablets, Mac, Windows, a lot of extensive testing, and so far it looks, just as good on any device, any browser, any operating system.
Perfect. So does this also allow us to do some of the, I know you have the side messaging, but can you also put the like newsletter type pieces in? I know that's something that, those who've signed up kind of get that, but if you're signed up for the electronic payment, do we get emails from it, or is it all just on the web portal?
You'll get emails, so you'll still get your bill ready email, and you can, and then you can elect for additional emails. That's where it's in this notifications here. So if you want that your payment is on the date that your payment is due, a payment reminder that comes out 3 days before it's due, if you pass due, and then there's some additional auto pay notifications. So and we will look at adding more of these now. Actually, like folding in the newsletters, the e-newsletters, would be a much bigger effort, and not something that the portal is really meant to do at this point and equipped to do. But that is the kind of thing that down the line we'd love to provide a little bit more of a one-stop shop, omni-channel experience for customers. But this is just our first little step.
Yes, no, I completely appreciate the minimum viable product idea. That's a great way to start it and work out all the kinks before you add all the niceties in. All right, well, that's all I had. Thank you so much. This looks wonderful. I can't wait to see it go live. I know this has been a lot of effort in the making over a number of years, so it's paying off. You have reason to be excited.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to put a shout out there that it's really been a big team. I mean, I'm the one that gets to do the fun of like presenting it to people, but it's been a big horizontal team across Eweb that has gotten us to this point.
Nice. Great. All right, I just want to point out that we're running a little over time, but if there's other people that do have questions that they want to ask, I don't want to waste the opportunity. So John Borofsky, I see you raising your hand.
Thanks. Just two quick questions. One, and you don't have to give me the answer to this right now. It could maybe come in an email. Just the cost savings to the organization of auto pay and paperless, as opposed to sending out the bill and doing it that way. That could come in a memo. And then the second question is, as far as payment options, can you link a bank account to it, or does it have to be a credit card? And then also, can you just talk maybe shortly about people who aren't set up, who have to do cash payments and those types of things? I know that Frank was talking about maybe we'll have some sort of a kiosk at some point, but those were my questions.
So the first one, yes, customers can use a checking or a savings account. And then as far as cash payments go, that's sort of some further exploration that we're doing. So here soon, we're sending out some messaging to customers that frequent the lobby and may have paid in cash. We didn't actually separate them out, and are asking for some of their feedback about some other payment options that include, kiosks, paying at some designated location, like a credit union, using like a retail partner, like a Fred Meyer 7-Eleven kind of situation, pay by text. I'm just sort of seeing like what options would best fit their needs, since customers came into the lobby or paid by cash for different reasons. And then we'll figure out, how to best meet those needs going forward. But definitely something we have our eye on.
All right, Matt or John Brown, any last questions? Nope. All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Rachel.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel.
Look forward to seeing the rollout. And if any commissioners want to be part of your test, do we just email you, or how do we do that?
That works for me, or email Anne, and she can help coordinate. But yeah, I'd be happy to have any and all of you.
Great, thank you.
Even you, Commissioner Brown, even you.
Careful what you ask for, Rachel.
All right, thank you. That was actually a lot of fun.
All right, so our next topic is a review of the strategic plan. So Frank, that is over to you.
Yeah, it's over to me. Well, thanks to Julie and Rachel and the team. I think they said it right when it was something that you just don't want to get wrong. If you really want to know what it's like to get a billing system wrong, just look at Seattle about 3 years ago with their new billing system and all the headaches that it caused. But I don't know if I'm quite as excited as Rachel was when she did her presentation, but I'll tell you, this is really the attempt tonight to kind of zero base the board a little bit in the most recent strategic history. It starts really with the fact that, if you look at the slide there, there's a few people on that few pictures there of people who did not participate in the process. Some of the ones in the upper corner, obviously, but then, John Brown and Sonia Carlson were part of the most recent strategic process, but the rest were not. And so this is an opportunity for the board to make comments, review it, ask questions, and for me to give you a little bit of my context when it was developed, kind of the story behind the story, if you will. Go ahead with the next slide. I'll see if I can catch us up a little bit on the time here too. Really just a reminder of the profile, public utility, a little bit of the size. I think most of you know this information pretty well. And we manage over $1 billion worth of assets, water and electricity. Go ahead with the next slide. I mentioned that with this slide that there's a couple different ways to look at strategy and kind of where we ended up with what we did. Some theories actually say that it really matters on the market that you select. You can be a poor performer, but if you pick the right growing market, you can be successful with it. I'm not sure that really applied to us, given that we were a public utility. We had to define a charter, fairly consistent over the last 100 years. Another theory was really about your resources. You pick whatever opportunities fit your resources the best. Resources can be, assets. They can be human talent. They can be a number of different things. The alignment, which is kind of, and then there's this one down in the lower right corner, which just says strategy doesn't matter. It's all about execution. I'm not sure that I agree with that, although there are situations that you do see that. We kind of ended up with an alignment approach to it, which was to understand that we had certain conditions in our market and we had to align our resources to try to maximize the market that we were in, and look at the best opportunities we could. So we kind of ended up by doing that, looking at the challenges we saw in front of us and saying, okay, how do we align our resources to maximize our benefit for, in this case, our community and our customers, based on the situation and based on our resources. Go ahead with the next slide. We also, kind of coming into this, I'll say that I had not been the general manager very long, and I really wanted to kind of take a look at where we were. A lot of that had to do with customer feedback we were getting. Felt like the organization was pretty fragmented at that point, and we really needed to focus in on our core mission and our core duties to the community. This is some of the feedback that we were getting from customers, attitude of inflexibility, quasi-governmental, certain things they felt were things that we just should be doing. And so this, combined with a few other pieces of information, felt like we really needed to focus the organization. And so part of a recognition of the fact that the strategy went from previously, a few years ago, 37-page strategy down to 4 or 5. Part of that was just a recognition that we needed to focus as an organization, and to a certain extent, it didn't necessarily matter on what, but we found a couple of what's to focus on. Go ahead with the next slide. One of the things that we found that we needed to focus on, if you look at the upper left-hand quadrant or corner here, you see the 2015 customer survey. The black circles are what customers think are important, and then the blue triangles are how they think we're doing at it. And you can see that drinking water quality pretty consistently #1 on the list. Water reliability, source protection, electric service, really the reliability of the systems are consistently at the very top of importance. And in fact, our customers at that time even felt like we did a good job with it. Then we came to this efforts to control cost, and really customers just graphically here said, hey, this is important to us. It's in the top tier of what we think is important, and we really don't think relative to the other things you're doing that you're doing a very good job of that. The 2019 data in the lower portion of the screen there shows again the same kind of top things of importance. We still do a good job of those. You start to see a couple other things come into play around environmental stewardship. But you do see a much narrowing of the gap on the far right side there with efforts to control cost. The importance dropped a little bit, and our effectiveness went up, so we've narrowed that gap some. I think it's always something that customers really care about. They care about drinking water quality, they care about safety, they care about affordability, reliability. Those are really the big things, and so we found something back in 2017 that we thought was really important to the organization because it was important to our customers, and that did initially mean that we had to focus, and we had to make sure that we were managing our customers' money. And so we really started to emphasize that this is not our money, it's our customers' money, and we needed to treat it accordingly. Go ahead with the next slide. It was pretty obvious as to why they felt this way. If you look at the period of time, the 7 years leading up to 2016, and really if you count 2016 as well, you can see some really significant pricing increases. They're almost 35% on the electric side, and over 70% on the water side during a period of time. And right after that, it's like, well, no wonder people were sensitive to rate increases at that time. And so we felt like there was an opportunity to look at this. But we also felt like it's hard to compare just utility costs. We started to look at utility burden, which was how much were our customers paying, what percentage of their median household income was going to utility costs. And that has dropped really since the beginning when we started to take a look at some initial measurements. 16% so far, but we've made some headway really just through prudent cost controls. as well as other investments. So I don't want this to sound like the intent here was to be cheap. The intent was to manage our money well and make good investments. Go ahead with the next slide. You know, one of the things that we also recognized on the horizon, and really strategy is about moving toward a new horizon, or a horizon that where you want to go, is that we had some large electricity resource decisions to make. Starting really, you know, these are color coded according to different types of resources. The larger circle on the left is Carmen Smith, that was around relicensing, and then the three trio of circles out there on the right are ones that we've started talking about already. Lieberg, Walterville, and then Stone Creek is the other one. Those have those are hydro licenses in the late 2030s or 2040. And then there's a number of resources, kind of a cluster in the middle of the 2020s decade, which are some pretty significant decisions. But go ahead and advance the slide. One thing you'll see is there's this other big one. There's a huge one here called Bonneville. And so if the size of the circle is proportionate to production, you can see a lot of production related decision around that 2028 timeframe when it came to, and really, how do we set ourselves up to make the best decisions we can, even relative to Bonneville and other relationships and other resources going forward. Go ahead, next slide, please. This is the Bonneville timeframe. I won't go into this. I just wanted to note there's a number of different milestones, and not any in the next, really for Eweb in the next year or so, other than to really start to prepare ourselves to look at various options, including what we would like out of Bonneville over the next several years to prepare for potentially a new contract in 2028. Go ahead with the next slide. Thank you. We ended up, after going through the process, with a couple of things that we thought were our strategic priorities. One was to really start to look at, on the right side there, the rebuilding of our generation portfolio. That is something that I mentioned earlier, especially relative to the Bonneville contract. And then on the left, a recognition that one of our most important things that we do is we provide these vital services, electricity and water, and we needed to make sure we were able to do that under a number of disruptive conditions, and you know, that the ones that were popular to think about at that time and continue to be is things like earthquakes. But as you know, if you just look at the last year, I don't think a pandemic was high on our list, and we did think about wildfires, especially relative to our water source. But I think we need to look at this broadly, and we need to make sure, I think that's still an issue to be concerned with, and how do we prepare for various types of disruptions? You know, there's cyber attacks, there's chemical spills, there's all kinds of things that can keep utility people up at night, but our job is to ensure a continuity of service under whatever threat and conditions that we're presented with. And so that's these were the two priorities that rolled out of the strategic process. I think there's still priorities, because if you look at the future horizon, those will still be issues that we need to work on. Go ahead with the next slide. Kind of where we are relative to the original plan, which started in 2017. We figured that we couldn't do this all at once, and the strategy is really about positioning the utility and a journey as opposed to just the destination. So we broke this up into a few different phases. We're kind of in the middle of this consumption flexibility. Some of that is around understanding that the consumers will play a role in the balance of supply and demand, whether that's electricity or water. To get there, we needed to improve our relationship with customers, and I don't think that ends. These all continue to go. And then eventually we start to align the resources, and that's on the water side. That means a second treatment plant. It means understanding mobility opportunities, as well as distributed emergency sites with consumption. And then on the electric side, it means that there's an understanding that the resource base is changing across the West, including for Eweb. and could change significantly, and how do we align and synchronize the supply side with the demand side. And the theory there is, especially on the electric side, the better off we sort of synchronize supply and demand, the better service that we will eventually supply our customers, because that will be, it's the most affordable, it's the most environmentally conscious, it's the most reliable. So we have to synchronize all those things in the final step there. Go ahead with the next slide. We also, as part of the plan, we did take a look at our mission and vision and the values of the organization. I'll say there's a few kind of keywords here. You know, the vision basically says what we do and how we do it, and there's kind of a key term in there called, we use the term delivering drinking water and electric services. Delivery, you know, we're very highly integrated. On the electric side, we do generation. We're not just a delivery or distribution utility, and that's up for some discussion with the board, whether that's still going to be appropriate going forward. I think it needs to be a conscious decision. But we need to do this in a way that's consistent with our community. So we deliver these services. We want to be consistent with the values of our community. And then the values that we identified organizationally, safety, reliability, responsibility, which we've had some discussions about whether that is both explicitly affordability and environmental stewardship, and then community, recognizing that this board is, you know, people, it's not like an organization where the board is sort of this secret society. We're a public organization. We're governed by representatives of the public. And so we wanted to capture and make sure we codified these as part of that process. Go ahead with the next slide. And so, you know, with that, I wanted just the board to have the opportunity to ask questions, you know, where things may have come from. If you have comments, I know, you know, if John Brown or Sonia Carlson wanted to add some context from their perspective as well, that would be helpful. But this was really as kind of a first attempt to kind of ground the board in where we were and why we got there. Obviously, there's a lot of things that go behind this. I could have probably put a 100 slide presentation together. But I really kind of felt like I wanted to kind of zero base and let the board comment and ask questions and have a roundtable discussion about kind of where we came from, where we are, and why. So with that, I guess, President Schlossberg, I'll turn it back to you and see if there's any comments, questions, discussion. This is really a work session, so it's for the board. Things that people are comfortable, uncomfortable with, things that we want to pursue differently. I'm open to all those, but the intent tonight was to kind of zero base some of the thinking. And so I'll turn it back to you.
All right. Well, I'm going to jump in and ask the first question. And I'm getting some feedback, so I don't know if Frank, you want to. There, that's better. Sorry about that. Okay, so my question is actually, how was it put together? So was it like a process that was the board and you? Was it something that you and the executive team put together and brought to the board? How did it actually come about?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mindy. I think it started originally. It just started with some dialogue, and to a great extent, I would say my first 6 months off on the job, I spent quite a bit of time observing the board. I'll say that trying to understand what I thought, and I do joke about this. It's actually done in great fun, but I have referred to the board as 5 people with 15 personalities, and I think that I was trying to wrestle through that a little bit. Only in the context that I think Eugene is that way, and so I think you represent Eugene well, because I think that's a fair characterization of the community from time to time. And so I wanted, really the first few months were a lot of observations, you know, paying attention to the dialogue that the board had at board meetings was a big piece of that. And then it was probably April or May when we had, I'll say, a work session that was around, here's some strategic things that we need to start thinking about. It was kind of a back and forth, quite a bit of, I'll say, management and staff kind of working together with various kind of straw proposals of different areas. I describe it as catchball, kind of back and forth with the board primarily. It's hard to just say, oh, let's dream something up together. And so there was quite a bit of, here's some ideas, and then certain things would get shot down or built up, and then we'd kind of rethink that, and then we'd sort of come back. So it was mostly between myself and the board, with quite a bit of just listening and trying to understand context and just trying to do some assessment of our situation. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it was a back and forth primarily with the board and management, and then of course with management there's a lot of things that kind of happen behind the scenes as far as checking things out and doing surveys and things like that.
Great. Sonia, go ahead.
I mean, I was just going to bring up, I do remember at the kind of the first meeting that we had around this topic, we had, you know, very broad discussions about some of the big picture items that were coming down the pipeline. And we looked at what we had before and whether or not, you know, what the language that was in there really encompassed where we thought we needed to go as an organization in order to tackle those challenges. And when we looked at, I mean, at least for me personally, when I looked at what language we had prior and the kind of things that it seemed like we valued as a board at that time and the pathway we wanted to go, it felt like there was a disconnect between the language that we had versus where we wanted to go. And we wanted to provide really clear guidance that we could easily measure as an organization and create KPIs around that we could see that there was progress on each of these different items. And so, you know, now we have lots of KPIs around this different strategic plan, but at that time, it didn't seem like there was good metrics around it as well. And being able to see, you know, these are the things we want to accomplish over the next few years, and these are the steps. You know, obviously, you know, some of the steps are in the mix, but these are the things that we really value as a whole. And I really appreciated that conversation, just more broadly about, you know, as a group of what we value and what the other board members, what they wanted to see. So I've been excited about this meeting, particularly to find out, you know, we have this plan, it's here in place, but there may be other things that, you know, there's mid-course corrections and things that new board members have new perspectives and ideas. And I would certainly like to hear what the new board members, well, and old board members as well, you know, where we're at and where we want to go. So I'm looking forward to that part of the conversation.
Yeah, Mindy, I think that Sonia captured something that I think was important. There was a lot of discussion broadly about what things we thought were issues and what we thought was going to be important, not just today, but, you know, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And this board is already starting to wrestle through some of those things that might be 20 years out. But it was hard to find in the plan at that time where that was stated. And you know, sometimes it's like, well, what are we trying to say here? And then you go, well, let's just say it. And so you end up kind of coming back to something that's a little bit, I guess, more direct, because, you know, one thing I feel is really important in a strategic plan is it gives you guidance on where to go, but it also tells you where not to go. And I felt like there was no limit on where we could not go before. And so I think the conversations that Sonia is talking about were really helpful to me to understand where the different board members wanted to see the organization go, and then trying to see if there were ways to coalesce that into something very direct, and also understand, well, what would we have to give up to do that? I think those are really valuable conversations.
Great, thank you. We can just keep the conversation going. I don't need to ask a bunch of questions in a row. If there's somebody else who wants to jump in, I'm happy to have someone jump in. John Brown.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Frank for that presentation and things. Just for some of the new people, one of the perspectives, I'll just go into the disaster preparedness and resiliency. We're in the midst of a $70 million potential construction project, a second source. And when we talked about the priorities, you know, it didn't matter if we had 2 sources of water because everything else is going to be blown up. We'd have a water treatment plant in Glenwood that couldn't serve anybody. So to take it from all the strategic goals we had to bring it down into something that's not only measurable but reasonably attainable is what we did, at least on the disaster resiliency. And you can see how many sites do we have already, because you know, you can go a few weeks without electricity. Try going 2 days without water. And we're talking about potentially months without water, without a system with it, you know, potentially broken and collapsed reservoirs and things. And so we saw that sense of urgency, and that's where we're going with that. And I think, you know, that's just one example of we've had this master plan and these goals, but you know, how many could we really check off in the last decade? And now we're able to check things off. And I think that the 2 main ones we have now really encompass a lot more than just, you know, where we're going to buy our electricity and, you know, how we're going to prepare for disasters. And so I'm glad we have what we have, but I'm open to listen to other people.
Yeah, Commissioner Brown, I think one of the things that I remember that came out of this was not that a second treatment plant was not important, but there was a sequencing of things that we needed to do that was just as important, because you can't do everything for everybody all at the same time unless you don't want to do anything very well, because that's usually what happens. And so we recognized that the situation in Glenwood was also one where there were a number of land use issues, and we needed to do some things from a distributed perspective that would be affordable. They would show progress. They would be part of the big puzzle. But then a second treatment plant was something that we would position for later. And you know, now we're later, and I think that there's a little bit different position that needs to be looked at. But I think what you point out to me is that the order of which you pursue things is also important.
Great. John Borofsky.
Thanks. It was good getting familiarized with this over the last few days, and I hope that it is not a static document. It's one that can be amended and updated, because I think that the priorities in 2017 are obviously going to be changed from the priorities in 2022, 2025, 2028. And so one of the questions would be is, at what point do we look at this and do another dig back into it? And with regards to that, you know, I wasn't on the board in 2017, and I wasn't really listening to the community as an Eweb commissioner back in 2017, but I know that in 2021, the community, I think, is much more attuned to some of the things that we do as a utility, i.e. in regards to carbon and our role in our community's efforts to reduce our carbon footprint. And so I think that that's something that I think for me is something in the strategic plan that we can lean into a little bit more, possibly, if it is updated, you know, if and when we decide to do that. I think just, you know, if you went out to the average person in 2017 and said, how many parts per billion of carbon do we need to reduce? They would have said, what are you talking about? Or maybe 1 out of 50 would know, whereas now I think 1 out of 10 would have some sort of impact on that. So Again, I'm really happy to see a lot of the things that are in there, but I also think that we can take it and move it forward. And I think especially with some of the major decisions that are coming up, you identified them back in 2017. Here are some things on our horizon. And now, the horizon's getting closer, and it may be, time to reassess if that's appropriate.
Yeah, Commissioner Borofsky, I think it is appropriate. I think there's an important balance between having a plan with some stability and also recognizing that it has to be a living approach to it, because things do change, they do evolve. I actually think this is the year to start that evolution, and that's part of why there's a goal around that. The way I don't see the process going where we drag out the plan and we actually wordsmith it. What I do see is picking some certain subjects and diving into some of that content. I know that Commissioner McCrae and I have had some discussion around what does a resource principles or policies document look like, right? And there's obviously carbon impacts to that. There's cost impacts to that. So what does a future portfolio of eWeb need to look like? And that can be a discussion that we can have and really dive into that will then, we'll capture that and sort of try to incorporate that into a strategic document. And we may have several of those on these topics that then start to coalesce around a strategic plan. That tends to be, I think, more effective than just saying, okay, here we go. Here's this 4 pages of words. Let's all contribute to some editing here and see what we want to add or take away. I think the quality of the conversation gets a lot better when you pick certain things. There's certain things around what does resiliency look like on both electric and water. How much of, how many days do we think we need to have for backup supplies, for example? I just think that there's ways to dive into that and then capture it in a plan, as opposed to saying, oh, here's this plan, everybody, go on and provide your edits. So I'm hoping that we can have a number of work sessions around some of these different topics and just dive in. Staff and management can do a lot of research and provide various pieces of information and data that we think will inform the conversation, but then also listen to you and the commissioners' perspectives on where they think that needs to go.
Before Sonia, Matt, do you have something? Do you want to ask any questions or have any comments?
Sure, I'll just weigh in really briefly. I'm curious about the timeline for updating. Frank, the way you just described updating sounds fine to me. I agree. Wordsmithing the whole thing isn't necessarily the best approach. So diving into details is good. But it does feel like we want to have some timeline by which we've kind of made our adjustments and then leave that alone and move on to other things. So I'm curious what you think about that. I'm also curious, you said that you feel like the strategic plan, and it may have just been the process in developing it, helped you think about or understand what's off the table, what's not our priority, which I agree with you is equally as important as what is. And it's not articulated in the strategic plan. It might be something that we want to bring in. It's just some statements of like, we're not trying to solve this problem or that problem because they're too big or they're out of bounds. And even if it's not necessarily printed as a part of the strategic plan, to have it accompany the strategic plan so that we're all cognizant of that might be useful. There's a calendar you showed that had policy workshops in late 2021. I'd love to see that calendar just to review it because it looks like there's more process stuff there that's a part of this. Sure, yeah. So I'm just kind of curious to dive into that at some point because there's so much to unpack there. That doesn't have to be tonight, but I do look forward to diving into that a little bit. And I think the policy workshops would be super useful to help us think about our strategies going forward. And then lastly, the survey results that you showed us at the very top, they all showed results from 5 to 10, like on a scale from 5 to 10. I assume that when those were done, it was actually a 0 to 10 scale, but I'm just checking. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I think it was 1 to 10. I don't remember if there was maybe there was a 0, but it was a 10-point scale.
Whatever the case, it's worth noting that all of the responses of the things that people felt really strongly that we need to be doing, we were above average. We were above 5. Not that average is a great standard for us to be aiming for, but also to point out that overall, the community seems like the community feels like we're achieving the things that they want us to achieve. I would be interested in seeing those the survey results there kind of more broadly, just to understand, you know, what things weren't prioritized, what people were less concerned about. I think that's just as useful to think about in the context of our conversation on strategies or strategic planning. That's all I have. Thanks.
Yeah, Commissioner McCray, we can get you all kinds of the raw data around the surveys and the full reports. That we did two. Actually, we did a qualitative and a quantitative. The qualitative was where we interviewed people in the community. The quantitative one was one that was more mathematical and did rankings. Now there were things that were, it's all relative because nothing we do people felt was bad. So there was nothing that was low on the list. But some of the lower things were, you know, how much does Eweb get involved in economic recovery, for example? You know, that one relative to the cleanliness of the water we drink, it was low. I mean, it was. Now, does that mean it's not important? No. A lot of people feel like that's where rates come into play. But I think that's just an example. There were a number of things that were, you know, does Eweb participate in community events? You know, what's our role there? And so, and then, you know, you look at things that aren't on the list. You know, telecom is one that it's not listed in the strategy, and yet it's one that is there an opportunity in the community? I would tell you that it's possible that you would be more involved in telecom. I would think there's going to be some things that we have to give up, and I would be very clear as to what I think those have to be. And some of it is just business model. You know, how do you start becoming a delivery business model across different types of platforms? So my timeline, I think I definitely want to have a plan, a new plan in 2021. I'm thinking that there'll be a number of different policy discussions through the first 2.5 quarters or so, and then we can actually get into the comprehensive sort of pulling everything and integrating things together probably in late summer or the fall, so that we have a plan that sort of captures all those different discussions. So that would be my intended time frame. Certainly this year, hopefully, you know, third quarter.
That sounds right to me. That's great. Thank you, Frank.
I just have a quick question about the surveys. So the survey that you showed us was done in 2015 and then another one in 2019. And so do we regularly schedule those kind of customer surveys?
Yeah, we have historically done those, President Schlossberg, about every 2 years. We did the, now that's the quantitative one, and we've tried to ask some consistent questions, and then we'll throw in a few new questions here and there depending on what's relevant at the time. But the quantitative one has been every 2 years, and we have those going back, I'm going to say 10 or 15 years worth of history. Not always that interval, but pretty consistent. And then we started the qualitative one. I think 2015 was the first time we did that, and then we did it again in 2019 just to see, because if you recall, I think it was the years run together. I'm sorry, it was either last year or the year before when part of the discussion with the board at that time was, where are we at in the strategy? And I think it was a valid question. And so given the part of the first phase was around customer confidence and really just performing well in the sense of building, community and customer confidence, we needed to do one, and so it was reported as the quantitative and qualitative results in that context, and we have made progress. There's still a ways to go. There'll always, I think, be a ways to go when you're a monopoly. I think there's a certain expectation that comes along when there is no direct customer choice. And so there's a certain critique that we expect, and on the other hand, I think there's a certain obligation that we have in that. So it was within the last year and a half that we just kind of did this extra assessment to see where we were at.
Got it. Well, I think it will be really interesting if we're doing one again this year, because 2020 certainly threw everyone for a loop, and it'll be interesting to see if people's priorities have changed a little bit. And that might inform some of our decisions too.
Yeah.
Sonia. You're muted.
Thank you. I definitely think this is the right time to revisit the strategic plan. And we have, over the last few years, we have made some adjustments to it. To Commissioner Borofsky's point, we actually did, in the last iteration, we specifically called out GHGs in the responsibility value because we thought that needed to have more focus. And I would certainly agree that if there's other things or projects that we need to do to help move that along the utility perspective, I would be in favor of that. I also wanted to note that, in discussing the customer surveys, a big part for me in helping, ask for responsibility to be a piece of it was that major gap between what people think is a value and where we're at financially. And we've seen narrowing there, but it still continues, at least from what we saw in 2019. And I also think out of that survey in 2019, what we also saw was that the reliability piece was still a gap there. And I'm remembering that we had the big ice storm and snowstorm in 2019. So some of those we have to put into context of, thank you, into context of kind of what the major weather events were that were putting challenges on us. And we definitely learned a great deal about communication with the utility. And I know that, with the bill pay system, there's been work there to help with communication. I also think that there's been quite a bit of work done in terms of communication around, when we have the outage. So when we do this, my main point in bringing this all up is that when we do the next survey, and I'm a big proponent of getting this kind of data from customers every time we do one of these strategic plan reviews, because we are here to serve the citizens, and getting a taste for where they're at and their understanding in context of where we're at as an organization, I think is absolutely key. So I would personally advocate for seeing how we're doing communication-wise during these kind of shocks to the system, because I know that was an issue that we had wanted to tackle a little bit more. So seeing if customers feel like there's been improvements there. I'd also, obviously, the items that are on here are good ones. I'd also like to see if we can bring up the point that Frank made. I've been getting some constituents reaching out to me about expanding broadband service, and there's always trade-offs in that kind of discussion, as Frank mentioned. Maybe then, is that a higher priority over cost? Is that a higher priority over something else? But I think it would be good to get, we have a few very vocal people in the community that push on one thing or another. Is that a broader sentiment from the community, and especially during times when we can't have or it's much more difficult to have those kind of conversations out in the public at, you know, neighborhood association meetings and other things of that nature. This kind of feedback would be very useful. So those are some of the things I would certainly like to see how the public thinks we're performing. And I'd love to hear other commissioners' responses and thoughts on areas that you think that, you know, how are we doing? How does the public feel?
Yeah, before the commissioners responded to that, Sonia, I would say that in 2019, in late 2016, 2017, we had the ice storm, and then in 2019 we had Snowmageddon, which the surveys were, you know, after that. We did capture quite a bit of communications anecdotal data near those events. So it's interesting because at the first ice storm, we didn't even have an outage map at all. And I remember the commissioners at the time saying, gosh, we really need an outage map. Look at Lane Electric's outage map. And, you know, okay, you know, even though theirs was great big zones, and we thought, okay, well, we need to find different means of communications. And so by 2019, when we were in Snowmageddon, the amount of outreach was significantly different between Eweb and customers. Now, was it perfect? No, there's a lot of areas to continue to improve. And I think, unfortunately, with every kind of, I'll say event, disruptive event, and you know, Fire Upriver is a good example. Our outreach this time with proactive programs, proactive waiving of past balances and things like that for customers, that was a result of the strategy that has been employed, and some of the issues around communications. And so it would be, I would like to hear too from other commissioners as to what they think, you know, of your question about what seems to be important. What are you hearing? You know, how are we doing? And I think it's always good. And a lot of times you get that face to face, right? You get it with you get it from a neighborhood meeting, you get it from a friend, you get it from, you know, and not everything's good and not everything's bad. And you can't do everything for everybody, which we've learned, but you can figure out, okay, these are the things that we think are most important.
So given that, do people want to say what they think are most important? Not to put everybody on the spot, but Frank did kind of open that up.
Process. So most important in what context? And I mean, because I represent about 25,000 people, and like we all do proportionately, and you know, and we're in a position that's not heavily contested, so there's not a lot of debates and not a lot of people that know about my position. So if you ask me about what my priorities are, you already know the answer. It's the water and et cetera. It's what the community does. But my job is to represent the 20,000 people. And so I'm kind of wondering in what context, Mindy, are you asking me as I represent wards 4 and 5, or a perception of community values, or what?
I would say both those things. I mean, you're responsible for your constituents,
Mm-hmm.
and we're also individuals who come with our own set of values. So I think it's kind of a mixture of both. I mean, people elected you, and it doesn't mean that you have to do everything that your constituents say, because you're a person who has your own beliefs. So.
Okay, thank you. No, that just kind of adds a little perspective for me. So I was gonna say I know that climate change is going to come up here, and I'm all for that. And whether or not that's pushes out, you know, emergency preparedness and resiliency as a priority. You know, I got to have to look at both of them as a sense of urgency on that. But you know, I wouldn't want to sacrifice one for the other. So I'm going to kind of wait and sit back and see what others say. Thank you.
Anyone else want to jump in? Now's your chance.
Well, I would just say for me, it's too soon for me to answer that question. I mean, I have, again, like John Brown, I have my personal feelings, but getting a feel for my constituents is something that I'm in the process of doing. Actually, you know, one of my neighborhood association meetings starts at 7 o'clock. So I'll be, you know, when this wraps up, I'll be going into that and learning from those types of things. But yeah, I would say I need to learn more before I can really articulate exactly what my priorities are at this time, because I need to hear from constituents and see how those meld with my own personal feelings.
Yeah, Commissioner Brown, the one thing that I would want to include in some of those discussions is that I don't think those are mutually exclusive. I think you can be both resilient and environmentally conscious in the decisions to make. I think where we really need to approach things is to do what I think actually Eweb is starting to become pretty good at, and that's really defining the challenges and the problems well, getting a good definition, and working on a path towards solutions. Now, we tend to do things more than we talk about things, and I think that in some ways can help us in that. But I don't think resiliency and in being, you know, environmentally conscious, especially around atmospheric carbon, those are not mutually exclusive. I think there are solutions out there that we can do both. Now, when you do that, what's the impact on affordability? What's the impact on reliability? Those are the other things that we have to balance. And so I think it'll be part of management's job to try to provide to the board what the various conditions are around certain decisions that need to be made. The good thing is our resources are in pretty good position for the next, you know, 5 to 8 years. But we have resiliency work. There's alternative fuels. You know, for example, we've talked about hydrogen and fuel cells. That I'll tell you, if you had a fuel cell backup instead of a diesel generator, instead of going a few hours or a few days as a backup, you could go weeks to months, and it would be more environmental. So now that technology needs some further refinement and some further evolution. They do it in other countries, but I don't think that those are necessarily mutually exclusive, but there are impacts across the utilities, and we'll have to have those be out there in the open for all of us to see. We'll have to be transparent about what those trade-offs are.
I just want to say, I don't mean to put people on the spot also to say, like, what are your priorities? And then that's going to be it. This is your chance. So I guess, Frank, you kind of posed the question, and Sonia, you did too. So if there are things that you can think of right now that you want to share, you can, but this isn't your last chance. Or if you're somebody that likes to think about it a little bit more and you want to send it out in an email what your priorities are, that would be okay too, because I know that some people just like to kind of let it percolate a little bit more and think about it. So I don't want anyone to feel that they miss an opportunity if they don't speak up now. But Sonia,
well,
you look like
Mindy, I just wanted to just say really quickly, I mean, I was the one that kind of provoked the conversation. And from my perspective, I came in with a platform for my campaign of items that I, you know, committed to the community. So maybe not everybody is in that same boat. So this is an ongoing conversation that we can continue to have. For me, it was just really about trying to get to know what other members wanted to do. I mean, why did you run for office? Why did you know, what things did you see as needing to be, you know, done with the utility, and what did you want to accomplish? If you don't have that dialed in, that's absolutely fine. I just wanted to get a better sense of what that looked like. If you had something that differed, or, you know, was maybe new and unique in a different path, I just wanted to let you all know that, you know, especially since, you know, John Brown and I were there when this original plan was crafted, that it is a living document. And if there are other things that you feel like, you know, we need to do as utility, and bring those ideas out, that this is the open forum to do that. So that was really all I was trying to do in kind of raising that and giving more context to, how we got to the place that we're currently at, so we can review as a group if there are mid-course corrections that we need to take or not. I mean, if we like this plan and this is, where we need to go. I mean, again, this is something that we can revisit over the longer haul. It doesn't need to be, no, tonight we're changing the language here and we're modifying this. It's really more of a conversation starter about how we got here and why we did what we did, so that we know where to take it moving forward.
Go ahead, Sonia. Sorry.
And I was going to say, I mean, for the record, I suppose, if anybody's interested in the values and some of the priorities that I had, my campaign website had all of it lined out, and I don't want to take too much more time tonight, but I'm happy to go and dig in or look at other people's priorities too, if that's helpful. I'm just trying to get a sense for, where people are. It's sort of Frank's comment about studying the board for a bit. We have very new members, and it's nice to get to know you and find out what you want to do and how you work best. And so it was a way to, provoke some of that conversation.
Yeah, I would say that, and I saw Matt has his hand up. I just wanted to jump in real quick that part of my job, I feel like it's part of my job to take the 5 ingredients that I'm staring at here on the screen and sort of mix those into something that eventually tastes good, and sort of aligns the utility around something that the board as a whole is comfortable with the direction. It didn't, and when I say observed, I observed the conversations and the details around the conversations. It didn't take me very long to figure out what some of John Brown's priorities were when I came onto the board. It was just in the midst of conversations on specific topics that gets developed, but then it's my job to make sure that the board at large, because you are a board at large, is somehow developed into a cohesive path that all feel comfortable with, including those who you represent. And so it is a process. It's not a one and done, and it's about the editing of the words. And then I'll be honest, there are things that I think the utility needs to get out of the strategic plan that aren't there right now, and we're going to need the board to help us figure that out. This is not just a one-way street. There's some things in there that I think are some pretty significant direction that the board needs to provide the utility in order to set up some of these things in the future. So it works both ways.
Matt, did you want to say something?
Sure, I'll try and be concise and hit on a few things that are front of mind for me. One, I rely heavily on surveys of the community to get a better sense of what's important for all of our community and not just me or the people immediately around me. So that's part of why I've asked, Frank for those surveys, and I think continuing to do the surveys is really important, and that they be done in a way that's not biased. That we're getting results that we can rely on. So yeah, I think that's important. The things that I hear and that I want to see Eweb addressing, I feel like the strategic plan has all the parts there. There are a few things that I would just emphasize a little bit more, or I think that's it really, is just emphasis on a few things and adding some more specificity. I don't know that a strategic plan is supposed to be super specific, but for example, I think some targets or some specific goals associated with some of those strategic goals would be useful. So one of the things Frank and I were talking about is, from my perspective, it'd be useful if we had a carbon intensity goal for the electricity that Eweb is providing over the next several decades, just so that as staff are going about, renegotiating new contracts and figuring out how we're going to source power, they can see where we as a board and therefore we as a community want to be by 2030, 2040, 2050. I think similarly on the resilience front, there's when it comes to electricity specifically, we could look at some goals of how much of that power that we use on an average a year do we want to have either locally generated or at least local control of. So I think there's some more specificity that we could add to some of those targets that would be useful. So I think the resiliency part is important. I think the affordability part is important too. That's mentioned in there, and we don't talk a lot about that. But I think making sure that we're not putting undue pressure on low-income households. I think we could set some targets about that would add some flesh on the bones of that goal. And I think it's important that we think about affordability as not just rates. We talk about that a lot. Eweb is good at talking about that, but then we frequently turn back to just, well, what's the rate? And I think we have to give ourselves some targets that are not rate specific, but are really looking at, bills for people, the average household in Eugene instead. That's kind of my, initial thinking, just reflections after this conversation. Some of the things that are up for me as we revisit the strategic plan. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'm just going to add in my little piece, and I'm in the weird position of I'm not really sure who my constituents are. I guess they're everybody, so I can maybe take my pick or not. But so I mean, I can also look at those surveys, as a whole to inform my decision making. But I agree with the input that everybody's given, and then I also just want to second the idea of broadband or telecom. It's not something that I thought about when I ran for this office, but it's one of those things that definitely has come up this year as we all rely on as fast internet as we can. And I'm not sure if Eweb is the one that should be leading that, but I do think that it should be a public utility, and I would just like to explore it. I don't know that it belongs in the strategic plan, but that's just an area that I'm really interested in looking more at, especially because I know Springfield is doing a trial of community access to broadband. So that's all that I have. I don't know if there's anything you want to say, Frank.
Not really. I think that tonight was really about providing a little bit of basis for the board now at large. This is now a board that I see a lot of opportunity with from a strategic perspective. I think that since I've been general manager, I've been blessed with pretty good boards compared to a lot of the ones that I see around. And so I think this is no exception. I think that although when you think about, I think John Borofsky said that we're getting closer to the horizon. I think on some issues I wish the horizon would sit still. It seems to keep moving, which means we have to be dynamic. I also think that this board has the capacity and the capability to look at things broadly and strategically and from a policy perspective, and that's not always the case with boards. And so I really feel like, and I know I've said this a couple of times, there are a lot of issues for this board to wrestle through in the next year or two in particular, and we need some basis for those to make those decisions and recommendations on. And that's usually where a strategic plan and values statements and these types of things come in. And so that's why I think there's some sense of urgency. We'll start diving into some of these topics, including what I think is necessary if we were to start to explore delivery, other types of delivery models, and telecom might be just one of them. There could be other forms of energy, for example. You know, there's a lot of different things, but it's a different business model. And so if that would be something that I would have to do some research on, so that the board can understand the impacts. But I got what I needed tonight. It was really more of an opportunity to kind of talk about where some of these things came from and why. And I'll share some more of the detail that was requested here tonight. But it was really to kind of ground the board, at least for, you know, one opportunity to ground us in this at the same time. And so I know you have a retreat coming up where all kinds of ideas and things, you know, get to know each other. But I think we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and we need some basis to make some of those decisions on. And this is it. The strategic plan should be it. So yeah, I appreciate the questions and the feedback and comments. And if you have more, we're available to answer those.
Thank you. And I appreciate that we had a work session around this, because it's much different to talk like this than it is at a meeting. And I just feel that it's easier to share ideas in some ways and just hear what each of us has to think. So I look forward to the next time that we revisit this.
And I will say that I think the next time we do this, and maybe even, it might not be the March board meeting, but it might be the April board meeting, there may be an opportunity for the board to meet in person at the Rock with a telework station set up for staff and the public, so the board could actually be in the same room with lots of distance and lots of masks. Just so you know, this room has a capacity of 125, and there'd probably be 6 of us in there. But there's various screens and microphones that we're setting up throughout the room, so that may be a possibility to have even a better conversation, although we're kind of getting used to that. But we'll try it out and see how it works first. But that might be available as early as April.
All right. Yes, John.
Just as a longtime chef, Frank, when you're stirring together these ingredients of the 5 commissioners and you want to make it taste good, if you add enough butterfat to anything, you can make it taste good.
I second that.
In mind. Yeah. That's why we used to serve meals at these meetings, John.
All right, well, we are 18 minutes late, and John, I'm sorry that you're going to be late to your neighborhood meeting, but I think that is everything, unless there's anything that anyone wants to add that they haven't already. All right.
I would just say thanks, Mindy. I agree that this has been useful from my perspective. So, and thanks for herding the cats, Mindy.
You're welcome. And then lastly, just a reminder that we are having a very short board retreat on Monday. I apologize because I know that this format is not what we all need more of, but I really want to just offer us an opportunity just to kind of chat. And I sent you an email. If you could please respond, because even though we can't gather together in person to eat, we are still going to eat together. So check your email and respond. And I guess not you, Frank, but the rest of us will see each other on Monday at 5. And the meeting is now adjourned.
Thanks everyone.
Everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.